Welcome back to this series where we are writing a book completely from scratch in Claude. And in this video, we are getting into the outline, looking at how we can take what we've developed so far. We did a video on brainstorming, we did a video developing the characters, and now we're going to take that information and start building out an actual plot. Now we're doing this as a novella, and so it's not going to be a super long plot, but it should still be a cohesive narrative. Let's get into it. All right, so we're working in Claude here. This is Claude.ai, and this is by far the best way to access Claude currently because it is free in the US and the UK. Unfortunately, it's not available outside of the US and the UK at the moment. That is likely to change, but if you're in that situation, you can use a VPN to access it, or I believe there are some other ways to access it too. If you go to nat.dev, nat.dev, I believe you can access it there, and it's a pay-as-you-go model in that particular case. But here, let's just go ahead and start with this. Now, I've actually taken everything we've collected so far on the main story idea and the characters into a TXT file that I'm going to upload now. All right, now that I've got that uploaded, I'm going to say attached is a file with information about a story or about a novella that I'm writing. Today we're going to be writing a outline of the novella. Don't begin yet, just acknowledge that you've processed the information by saying, in quotes, read. Now, Claude is not as good as ChatGPT at following this particular instruction to say just read, but I'm just going to give it a chance to say it anyway, because sometimes it can go on and get a really lengthy chat after I say this, and so I just really wanted to keep its instructions brief at the moment. Okay, so it didn't do it exactly, but it's close. I have read and processed the background information in the attached file. I'm ready to begin outlining the novella whenever you'd like. Now, what I'm going to be doing for a novella outline is I'm going to be doing this in a 12-chapter format. Something I like to do for novellas is actually use the hero's journey as a structure, where every one of the 12 steps of the hero's journey, as outlined by Christopher Vogler, is one chapter. And so I'm going to say we're going to be using this structure. And then I'm pasting in information about each chapter. We have chapter 1, the ordinary world. Introduce the protagonist in their regular environment, showcasing their daily life and routines. So I'm going to say we're going to be using this structure. Please use the basic idea of the story to fill out these chapters. Feel free to add additional information not found in the original file if needed to fill out what happens in the chapters. All right, we'll see if it can do that well enough, but I have given it this story structure about what happens in each chapter, and I do feel like AI responds well to giving it chapter summaries. If you're giving it just like a basic, like here, use the Save the Cat framework, it'll do that, but you're going to have a lot of gaps in between, and so it's helpful for the AI to know exactly how many chapters there should be and what happens in each chapter. And so we'll see how well Claude is able to do this. All right, so we now have a 12-chapter outline for a novella based on the hero's journey, and it has actually done a pretty decent job here. There are obviously a few tweaks I would add, and I would want to add a little bit more detail, but this is actually pretty good. So let's just take a quick look here. We have chapter 1, Sherlock Holmes is introduced as an eccentric, opium-addicted detective solving mundane cases in London. Dr. Watson serves as his grounded companion who chronicles their investigations. So this is not necessarily a good start. The whole thing as a whole is pretty good, but it's not a good start because nothing's really happening here. And so we could say revise chapter 1 to have something more important happening. Maybe have them meet with the senator's grieving wife in chapter 1, meaning the call to adventure in chapter 2 could be something else, perhaps something more dramatic. Revise with this in mind. Okay, it took me literally. Now we have a bomb going off in Sherlock Holmes' flat, which actually, that could work. I'd say a bombing is probably too much. We don't want to kill off 221B Baker Street, but I like I like how it's thinking. It's taking me literally, and it's taking big steps. So anyway, getting back to the main outline, it's following all of the beats very closely. I liked chapter 4, meeting the mentor. Holmes learns Lord Greystoke, who is actually Tarzan, is also investigating the cult for personal reasons. Tarzan acts as a mentor, providing insider knowledge about the cult from a defector he shelters. And I realized I didn't even think about Tarzan as the mentor, but that totally fits into the structure of this novella, how I'd like it to be. Tarzan is definitely someone who's going to come in and act as a mentor figure in different ways, obviously, than Sherlock would be, even though he's younger than Sherlock, and Sherlock is obviously very intelligent. That's still the role that Tarzan is playing here. And then we have like crossing the threshold. Holmes and Watson trespass on cult grounds based on clues, witnessing occult rituals. They now fully commit to taking down the cult. So this is all good, but the only issue here, it's not really an issue, it's just the way things are, is that all 12 of these chapters are rather vague. It's not telling us very much in terms of specific details, and so I'm going to give it a few more guidelines so it can give me the specifics of what actually happens in each chapter. All right, I like where this is going. Got to always be polite to the AI overlords. Let's add a bit more detail to each chapter. Please revise, and for each chapter, follow the following format, and then I'm gonna just say description, and then in brackets I'll say a detailed description of what happens in the chapter here, and bracket. Next one I'll say setting. Tell us where this chapter takes place, and I'll say, well, we'll just go with that. Characters. Tell us the characters involved in the scene. We'll put conflict because every scene needs conflict. It is the lifeblood of a good story. Tell us, I forgot to put brackets here. Tell us what the main source of conflict is for the scene. And I'll add both external and internal. You should hopefully know what I mean by that. And so now we've got this framework. And again, I've said it so many times, but I'll repeat it again. Frameworks are super important for AI to give you something of quality. And so now that we've got this, I'm going to have it revise those 12 chapters. I'm kind of doubtful that it'll be able to do all 12 in one go, but we'll see. All right, so it did give us all 12, but unfortunately, other than this first one, which is okay, it really didn't provide much of a description. I asked it to give us more detail in the description, and I think just because of it trying to fit all of this into one response, it just naturally kind of didn't give us much. So I'm just going to ask it one more time. I'll say, give me a more detailed description for each chapter, going into the specifics of what happens. All right, it did better, but still not quite there yet. So I'm guessing this is one of those things you're just going to have to add a lot of the detail yourself, or take this in chunks and give it maybe the first 3 chapters and say really expand these chapters. But honestly, this description is enough to be getting on with right now, and we'll be expanding these in a lot more detail later on. So I'm going to take these and run with them. But there is one more thing that I forgot to add in the template I gave it earlier. So I'm going to add it now. I'll say, I'd like you to make sure that each chapter ends on a cliffhanger. Please outline what the cliffhanger will be for all 12 chapters. All right, so it gave us all of the cliffhangers, and these look pretty good for sure. And so I'm giving it one more prompt to kind of get it to summarize everything cohesively. I'll say now everything that, let's say, all right, now put everything we've covered so far together into one cohesive outline using the following structure. We have chapter number, then we have description, setting, characters, conflict, and cliffhanger. And so we'll see how well it does with that. All right, now it's given us the full outline. And I will say on this last one, it did a good job making sure all that information was here. And it was a pretty lengthy chat window here. So I'm pretty happy with this for now, but it's now going to require the finishing touch, which is me going ahead and giving it my own input. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to do that here in Atticus. I've got a document here set up for it. I'm going to create this is just a forward, but that I can just call it outline and paste it into here. One of the nice things about Atticus is that you can take one of these documents, and let's say you want to keep everything in one place, but you don't necessarily want it to show up in your final book. You can just go here to include in and say none, and now this won't show up in your ebook file or your print file when you're ready to export this thing once the book is done. And so this is what I do to kind of have a lot of those documents, those pre-writing documents like this, like my outline. And so let's go ahead and look at this a little bit closely. We're not going to do the whole thing, obviously, but let's look at chapter 1. So we've got chapter 1, The Ordinary World, which obviously will change the chapter title at some point, but that can wait. We have the description. While walking in London, Holmes and Watson encounter an American woman who frantically explains her senator husband acquired a rare copy of the Necronomicon and was killed on the Titanic. Now strange, threatening events are happening to her related to his secret research documents. That night, Holmes and Watson are attacked by an unseen force at home. Okay, it's not, we can work with these events, but I'd like to frame it in a way that is a little bit more specific. So, while walking in London, Holmes and Watson encounter an American woman who frantically explains that her senator husband, I'm not sure she would actually know this. So we're gonna say, well, she might, but more like she would suspect it. But that said, I don't think she's going to be telling them to them on the streets of London. So I'll say, who frantically explains that her senator husband was murdered on the Titanic. Watson explains that the Titanic was an accident, and she insists that it was not. Intrigued, Sherlock takes her back to 221B Baker Street for a full consultation. And then I'll say, while at their home, the woman explains that her husband had acquired a rare copy of, and we'll say she doesn't know that it's the Necronomicon necessarily. We'll say a rare copy of an occult book, and was killed and we'll say the Titanic sinking was a huge cover up for the cult. Well, let's say, and she thinks, because we got to keep in mind the world building we've already done here, and she thinks that the sinking of the Titanic was done in an effort to punish him for taking it from the cult. Now strange, threatening events are happening to her related to his secret research documents. Strange events are happening, and her daughter has been taken, which she thinks is related to her husband's secret research documents. Sherlock and Watson ask her a few questions. That might be too vague, but we can flesh it out later. In which Sherlock makes it clear that he doesn't believe... Actually, no. Sherlock does believe in the occult at this point. I'm just thinking through my own world building that I've already done. Sherlock does believe in that. Makes it clear that he doesn't think the Titanic, or that the cult would sink the Titanic just to get one book. But just then, an explosion rocks 221B Baker Street. Alright, setting London and the Holmes flat. Characters are Holmes, Watson, and the American woman. We should probably give her a name. We'll just say Stella, because that's the first thing that popped into my head. We can always change it later. An American woman, and I'll add it up here to Stella, who frantically explains has sent her husband. Okay, yeah. Conflict. Holmes doubts the woman's occult claims, but can't explain the odd events. He struggles. Let's see. Occult claims of being involved with the sinking of the Titanic, but can't explain the odd events. He struggles with his skepticism. We'll say not of the supernatural, because that's actually not something he struggles with currently. Maybe Watson. We'll say Watson struggles with the concept of the supernatural. And then the cliffhanger, Holmes and Watson are attacked by an unseen supernatural force at home. We'll say are attacked. Let's see. The trio, I'm just going to rewrite this, are attacked as the explosion rocks the apartment, or marks the flat. I should use the proper lingo here. At the end. All right. So this is more of what my outline would look like if I wanted to take it to the next level, which is to create the story beats. And so what you'll want to do is you want to put in a lot of this specific information. And that's really is the thing about AI. It can only get you about 50% of the way there, which is still more than you would be able to do yourself. And plus, I've saved a lot of headache by doing it this way. So you can do it this way and it'll get you 50% of the way there, but you do have to take it the other 50%. And so I'm going to move on to chapter 2 and chapter 3 and so on, and I'll see you in the next video.